it's like you feel like your head is full and you're suddenly not able to concentrate. My memory was, especially my short-term memory, but even my long-term memory, people I know, I would forget their names. Even people I would speak to them every day, I would just forget their names. And at the end, I even had a doctor who just told me, like, yeah, maybe you just didn't like your job. For me, that was already like a sign that these doctors are not going to help me. It doesn't seem I have any limitations anymore on the social part. When I look back, I said I was just walking. Like I would at least go outside once a day and just have a walk. Sometimes it would just be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And sometimes I would have a longer walk, maybe 45. But this was also around the time I started the program. Now I'm doing sports and I picked up my calisthenics a bit. I'm playing soccer. I just started a course of salsa dancing.
Nice.
And it's even more than what I could imagine.
How's it going, guys? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Alex, who 3.5 years ago, he came down with this pretty intense flu. And since then, things weren't the same. He actually ended up having a hypersensitive nervous system, having all these strange symptoms happening. And then you guys know the story just as well as I do. He went on that path of trying to figure out what was going on and, without sharing too much of his story. Alex, it's great to have you here. Welcome from the Netherlands. Want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. So I'm Alexandr, 31 years old. I live in a city, east part of the Netherlands. And I have these CFS symptoms. They started around 3.5 years ago. And yeah, from that moment on, I had these weird symptoms. And the moment I actually started the program, I started to see some substantial changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've been in the program for just over a year, right? It was about a year at this point.
Yeah.
And I remember you applied
August
for a
2022.
You applied for a very first program, ended up continuing to work on your own. And then you ended up joining, and then you made tons of progress up to this point to where you're now working, you're playing soccer, you're quite active and stuff. But let's go back in time. How did you first get sick? What was life like leading up to, you getting sick initially 3.5 years ago?
Well, I think it all started with my exchange abroad. So this was 2019. First half of 2019, I had an exchange in South America, and I went there around February 2019, and within the first month, I caught like a stomach disease or something. And like those whole 5-6 months I was in South America, I would feel sick some of the times, but I would just like push through and still go to events or do some trips or whatever. But I was sick quite often, and I already had these fatigue symptoms coming up. But in the end, I moved back to the Netherlands, and I felt something was a little bit off. I was a bit more tired. But in the Netherlands, I just continued doing what I was doing. I moved to Amsterdam, started working there, had quite a stressful life, and also was doing a lot of sports, doing some courses, whatever. And then during that period, I felt like that my stomach problems, like my intestinal problems, started to come again, and it was actually insane. And some days I would have to go like from 5 or until like 8 times a day for like number 2. And wow. I went to the doctor, and he said like, yeah, maybe it's the texture of your feces is just different or something. And I was like, come on, like 8 times.
Yeah.
And that's abnormal. And they didn't even consider to do any testing until actually when I got the CFS triggered, I figured out I had I had a parasite and also bacterial infection. But yeah, that was after my CFS got triggered. And
Got it.
so, yeah, well, let's talk about that part. And that was around the beginning of the pandemic. I don't believe it was COVID because it was just before everything got shut down. So I got triggered by some kind of flu or flu type of disease. And then I just continued working and I felt like something was off. There was this fatigue that didn't go away. Like first, in these months before, I would feel sick and sometimes be very tired, but eventually I was able to do stuff, to go do some sports or whatever. But this time was completely different. I felt something like I had trouble with concentrating and reading, and that continued for like a month or two. And at
So
the
this is
very
after
end,
you got sick when CFS was
yeah,
triggered. Got it.
yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And after a month or two, uh, yeah, I called my manager and I was saying like I'm reading four words, and by the fourth word I'm reading, I'm forgetting the previous three. So yeah, it was just for me like I had to pull back way before that, but I just continued because I just applied for this new job and I wanted to keep my job, but
Got it.
yeah,
Okay. So
I
5 to
just hit
6
that
months
wall.
leading up to you getting sick, you're already having this stomach issue. You
Yeah,
were having gut issues, all of that stuff. You were feeling tired, but it really hit you when you got sick that one time. And then
yeah.
from there, that's the brain fog came on, and you noticed work was way harder to concentrate.
I believe it was just one factor because all this time I had these stomach issues, but I had also like a lot of stress during that period. I had like financial stress, stress with other stuff, and like if you're in this constant state of stress, I think it was like a room full of gas, and you still need that trigger because sometimes the gas will be able to leave the room, but because there is no trigger. But when the trigger hits, everything just explodes, and it did at the winter of 2020. And yeah, from that moment, I really felt something was off, and I had a psychologist and doctor, but yeah, it was just one big process of doing blood tests and everything,
Mm-hmm. What were your biggest
which
symptoms in the beginning? Like, what made you take it really seriously and be like, yeah, something is definitely wrong here?
like I could sense um, there was some type of fatigue, and with brain fog, I mean, I also feel like this pressure inside of my head, and it's like you feel like your head is full and you're suddenly not able to concentrate. My memory was, especially my short-term memory, but even my long-term memory, like people I know, I would forget their names. Even people I would speak to them every day, I would just forget their names. And these were the main issues, and I got a lot of issues later in my like after a year or something. I started to have these weird issues like chronic pain, pin needles, dry eyes, like diabetes type symptoms, or
Diabetes type
something.
symptoms,
Yeah, like
or your blood sugar
once
would drop.
I like at the moment I couldn't test my blood sugar, but people who have diabetes suddenly have like dry mouth, heightened heart rate, dry eyes, and these are typical symptoms of people who have diabetes. And I had all these symptoms. Like I googled it, which I advise people not to do that much because googling, yeah, it just
Googling
it
is
just
definitely
freaks
not
you out.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like the first 10 pages googling these symptoms. Uh, Diabetes would pop up, and I was convinced that day I had diabetes. But then I went to the doctor and they checked my blood sugar levels, and nothing. I was actually disappointed. because
You were
I
hoping they
still,
found something, right? Because at least
yeah,
there's a solution, right?
yeah, because I was already imagining the rest of my life living with diabetes type 1, but at least I know what I have, and now I can work with it. And I can tell other people like, okay, there is something wrong with me, and we know what it is. So you'll have some type of excuse. While now you're still like, yeah, it's burnout or whatever. Like here in the Netherlands, you don't hear a lot of people say chronic fatigue syndrome. They prefer to say burnout, but burnout is just this very,
It's a vague
yeah,
term,
it's a
very
vague term.
general. It doesn't do it justice with all the symptoms you feel and how debilitating it is, right? So, um, yeah, walk us through when you were getting all those tests done. Um, what kind of feedback were you getting from the doctors, and just how was that whole journey trying to figure out what was going on before you found our stuff?
Um, so, like through these few years, I've been to a lot of doctors, and the odd thing was that with the blood tests, sometimes something would pop off. Like would have these very heightened results. I remember once I had this. One of my blood levels was like very high, and it referred to like the, I don't know what's it called again. When it's like a hormone or whatever that refers to your muscle breaking down. So around that time,
Creatine kinase or something, maybe CK levels or
I think it might have been CK levels, yeah.
yeah.
And at that time, I thought I had this like neurological disease or whatever, because I had tremors and whatever, and then suddenly that pops up, and now I'm like, okay, this is it. This is like the first stage of deterioration. And then 2 weeks later, my blood levels would be normal again. Like I would be relieved, but sometimes also really disappointed. And like at the end, I even had a doctor who just told me like, yeah, maybe you just didn't like your job. And I was like, I can't even walk. Like I can't even walk more than 2 kilometers, and you're saying to me I don't like my job. I was doing like before in Amsterdam, I was working at least 40 hours a week. I was doing sports like 4 or 5 times a week. I was doing calisthenic stuff. And now I can't walk. And now this guy is going to tell me it's all because of my job.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, that was already like a sign that these doctors are not going to help me, or they just don't know what's going on.
It's disheartening for sure, and lowers your morale when you put all your trust and hope, especially hope, in these doctors, and they say, oh yeah, we could do this test, and then you wait for the test multiple weeks or months sometimes, and it comes back perfectly normal. With something like this, to most people, when they're told you're perfectly normal, that's great news for them. But for us, it leaves us more confused. And we're sitting there kind of thinking to ourselves, I kind of wish they told me I just had something, because at least we can start treatment. Like being told you're perfectly
Mm.
normal, or it's just one small thing. You don't like your job, Alex. Like that's one of the hardest things to hear, because it's a lot more than that, right? Because the symptoms are very physical, right? It's not
Yeah.
just in your head.
It's everybody who goes through something like this, also with the long COVID people. I've also talked to people that have long COVID. It's not just that you don't know what's going on. There's no blueprint uh, of something that can help you to improve. At least they say, okay, it's something like stress. Go rest, or try to do some easy stuff, or there is no actual like explanation of what might be going on. And the system, I understand why it works like this, but it makes people push towards a more alternative route. So you're gonna try some new stuff. And one of the stuff I tried, like the very early things I tried, was to I booked this dietitian. And the reason that these people are very much in demand is also a lot of times they tell you that they think they know what's going on, and also they check your blood levels and they say like, okay, you need these supplements and you need to do this or do that, and it's basically I think these dietitians. Mine was actually an official doctor actually, but they start to give these standard supplements, the vitamin D, the magnesium, like
Mhm.
those are the basics, and then you have some weird stuff which some people take, but that's the first route most people go into, and it might have helped like on the short term, but I think even you told me you did like something similar, and in the long term, I felt actually worse.
Mhm.
Like it's like some kind of drug they give you, and suddenly you have the illusion of feeling healthier,
Mhm.
and then I don't know even if the supplements do anything, but in the end, like it doesn't change that much.
No. And if it does change stuff, it's very short term, and you have to keep taking it to feel the effects of it, or take even more. Um, Stuff like ashwagandha, adrenal support, like all these different things can help temporarily, but
Hmm.
a lot of times people take that stuff and then they kind of return to their old lifestyle, or return to
Yeah.
doing whatever they were doing that got them sick in the first place. So now they're digging themselves an even deeper hole because they don't realize it.
Well, I agree with you there. Because these are supplements. I'm not saying that they don't work, but even with ashwagandha and stuff, that would maybe improve your neuroplasticity. You have to put the mental work to
Mhm.
change stuff. And with these supplements, sometimes people think of these as an like an antidote, while they just assist you with whatever you need to do. But you
Mhm.
still need to do some work, which I found out later on.
Yeah, yeah. And let's talk about that. So, what made you want to apply for Recovery Jumpstart? And initially, why did you decide to just continue trying it on your own before fully coming on board?
Yeah. So I found your YouTube channel like from I think from the first day you started the YouTube channel,
Yeah.
and I suddenly started because I think you didn't even have 100 subscribers, and I started following you. I just started following everything, but you were just popping up on my algorithm
Hmm.
suddenly. And around that time, you didn't have the program yet,
Hmm.
um, but I was following some of your videos, and you put on the chronic pain video online, like the exercise, and I actually started to do that for quite some time. And like going back, how I got to chronic pain. So I was living in Amsterdam, and I practically moved to my parents' place, which was quite good for me in the beginning. But I felt I got very stressed there because my dad was already quite old, and he was at home all the time, and he didn't know what to do, like to leave me alone. And my mom was even worse than that. So they were so worried, but they actually made things worse, which resulted in a lot of clashes, a lot of emotional clashes. And I remember once I got so angry, I suddenly felt my limbs burning. Like I never felt something like this. And like a day after that, suddenly I developed chronic pain in my limbs. And I already had some pain in my back, but suddenly I had all my tender points were hurting, all my muscles were just tensing up, like even when I wasn't doing anything. And I would just look in the literature or whatever. You have this scientific literature how to define like fibromyalgia, and they say like if you have like the minimum of these tender points and they hurt more than a 6 or 7 or whatever, then you have fibromyalgia. And I was like counting them, and I was like, oh man, I have fibromyalgia now. And there, when you type in like fibromyalgia and like a cure, you don't find anything. Like you see some stories, but they're very rare. So eventually, coming back to your YouTube channel, that was one of the first things that actually made a difference. Like within 2 or 3 months doing the brain retraining exercise, I actually felt difference in my chronic pain. And after 5, 6 months, I think 80, 90% of my pain was gone.
Mm-hmm. It's like magic, right? It's like
Yeah,
magic. Yeah.
yeah,
So you applied, but you were already implementing the principles. And I think you were doing pretty good on your own because
mm,
after our initial call, I think it was 3 or 4 months after that, you were running quite a bit
yeah.
and you did it a little bit too much too soon, right?
So I know the first call we had, like that was the very first kickoff of the application, and you didn't even have the coaches. Like I think these were the very first programs you put online, and I remember that around that time I was very hesitant, also because of the financial part. So eventually I went with doing an online program, which was also focused on like brain retraining, but more on meditation type, also on general brain retraining, but also a lot of focus on meditation. And then up until the second call, I wanted to do it, but it was around that time we had the call planned. And I think just before the call, uh, my dad passed away.
Yeah, I remember
So
that.
that was quite intense. And we already had this call planned, and I was really being hesitant, like, should I do this or not? And also with the funeral and everything, um, yeah, I had to like also pay my mother financially.
So
But
essentially, it was just not the right time.
yeah, so and then at the third time, I was like, screw it. I I just really have to try this because I was just following you from the beginning on, and I always had a feeling like this might change something. And eventually, I joined the program August 2022. Yeah, almost
Hmm.
a little bit more than a year ago,
Hmm.
13 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was your capacity like right before you joined? Just to paint a picture for people.
Yeah, so as you remembered, around the first or second call, I was doing some reckless stuff. Like like I could walk, but I started to try to run, but that backfired quite heavily. And yeah, I was just pushing through. I was doing this type of graded exercise, but I was increasing it very, very fast, and I wasn't pulling back. I wasn't able to do like cognitive tasks. Like I could read on my very good days, but those days didn't lasted that much. And yeah, around that time, I was more or less housebound. I was visiting friends sometimes, but that would have been once every maybe 6, 7 weeks. But that
Oh,
was
wow. So you didn't leave your house much prior to you joining, around that time period. You're just
no,
resting as much as you can.
yeah. And I remember like around the first call we had, I was really bad. Like even on my worst, I think I was even bedbound for a week, and I couldn't even stand on my legs. And after
Yeah.
that, I progressed a little bit, but I just stayed stuck on just walking like 20 minutes a day outside from the house, maybe like 30 minutes, but that was it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you joined last August, and when you were in the program, what were the most helpful things for you that kind of shifted your recovery or really helped you gain momentum and progress? What were some of the big takeaways that you learned that you think might help other people watching this right now?
So there's so much information out there, and it's very hard to filter what works and what doesn't. And to say the truth, sometimes the idea is right, but it just doesn't click. So the biggest value of the program is just feedback. That's the very, like, you can get constant feedback. You can just ask like, okay, I'm doing this or I'm having this. Is it real? You need a lot of times that somebody tells you that this is normal or this is uh, like just keep doing it, or maybe you should pull back here. Because then if you don't have somebody that has already experienced something like this, then you're just in like some field with a lot of fog. You don't know where you're going. And
Hmm.
for me, that the feedback part was the most helpful thing that helped me. And I think especially also after the Jumpstart program, the calls also with the coaches to learn from their experiences, and to also constantly remind it. Because when you have this, like for instance, a program I did, it's just the same stuff all over again. You can't ask stuff, like you can, but it's not that interactionable.
Yeah, the feedback thing is huge. And I remember a perfect example of this with you was when you were going on that vacation, your first vacation in a long time. I think, was it Greece?
Yeah.
It was Greece, right? And you were unsure
Mm.
if you should go. Is this gonna make me worse? Is my body ready for this? And he gave you some reassurance and said, you know what, it's actually it's a good idea to go. You know, just do this and that and avoid doing this. And then you ended up, didn't you end up coming back even better than when you left with more capacity? Was it a wedding you went to?
Oh yeah. um Now, I actually went twice to Greece,
Yeah,
and
you went twice.
um, the first time I went, I was with a friend of mine, and I was so like stressed out because I was like, if I have the same capacity I have now while I'm going abroad, I will be in my apartment all the time, or maybe even worse. But the weird thing was when I didn't know then, but I figured out when you suddenly change location, something weird happens, and suddenly, like your symptoms, or in my case, all my symptoms went down. And this happened with every trip I did. And
Hmm.
I want to emphasize on like trip. Like if you just go to some kind of concert now, that would have been the case like around that period. But now, um, yeah, the trips were just like I was able to do a lot. I was able to walk a lot. I knew, I felt the symptoms. They were still there. They were still, well, they weren't debilitating anymore. Like I could go out, have some dinner, even go for a drink, and that was like a huge difference. It's like your symptoms are suppressed uh, in this other environment. And I would come back. I will feel great for 2 or 3 days, but then there seemed to be like some kind of payback because you have been like going out, and I don't know exactly what goes on in your brain and body. But what I was thinking was that you're in this you're in this heightened arousal mode, which on one side makes you, gives you some energy, and on the other side, I think your brain also associates a lot of times, like uh, being in your room, your bed, also with your health, your bad symptoms. So changing that, it's like a, I don't know what's the expression, like a two-footed sword. What's it? What's it, Miguel? You're
Double-edged
native here.
sword.
Double-edged
Double-edged.
sword. Yeah.
Yeah, double-edged sword. It works wonders, but it can also work the other way around, right? You'll have certain associations with different places. So new places are great.
Mm.
And so, you know, back to what we were talking about, we were able to give you some feedback before going on that trip. And then you went on that trip. We didn't hear from you for like a week or two, but you come back and like you did great. But then, okay,
Mm.
so how do we adapt? What do we do with the adjustment period after that? Are we going backwards? Like, should you have done that? And that's where we gave you a lot of reassurance. Like, no, that was the right thing to do. This is great. It's basically a big adjustment period. So yeah, the hands-on help is massive. That real-time feedback, that interaction where, you know, it's not like sending an email to somebody and you have to wait a few days for a response from one simple question. It's like you message us in real time and we can get back to you within a few hours. But for you, how helpful was it being on calls with other people going through this journey, just like you were on, trying to fix their nervous system, people who have been turned away by doctors? How helpful was it doing this alongside other people versus doing it just on your own?
Well, I think the great benefit of being in a group with other people is, first of all, you're in a group that people know how it feels like to be in this situation. And within the group, there are people who are uh, like ahead of you regarding progress, but also like behind you. And you start to also learn from people's other progressions. I think that was the most uh, helpful thing to see, like suddenly people being brave enough to just try something, because that's the most scary part, because you're having these symptoms all the time, and then suddenly somebody like goes to a restaurant or whatever and is able to maintain his composure. And I remember, like, I don't know who it was, but I did the same with, like, once I went with friends of mine to a restaurant and I felt this flare up coming, but I just reminded myself, like, okay, this is what it's about. Now I have to stay calm, like take long out breaths and just try to enjoy myself. Like I would see it as a type of training that would make the difference, that I have to go through this to improve. Like this is
Mhm.
essential. And that's what I got back from the calls. I would just learn from people's experiences. And it was also, I think for a lot of people in those calls, it's also like a nice thing to have. Because also these calls for a lot of the people are the only moments where you have some kind of social connection with other people, because the rest of the time you're just in your room and, I don't know, just scrolling through your phone.
Yeah, it can be a very lonely path. So these calls, for a lot of people, sometimes this is the only conversation they have all week with people
Yeah.
outside of just, their caretaker for a lot of them. So the social aspect is huge. Now
Aside, yeah,
go ahead.
aside from the symptoms, I think the social isolation is maybe the worst thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not even just the physical symptoms, right? That's what a lot of people don't realize. Um, Looking from the outside, it's why a lot of people, it's hard for them to empathize because we look normal on the outside, but we're dealing with both physical symptoms, but also like the mental struggle of the isolation, but also there's a lot of identity loss as well because you
Yeah,
can't quite work like you used to, or do sports like you used to, or hang out with friends like before. So, this does become like your new social circle, and these
yeah.
people really understand, right? Now, for you, you're doing much better now, right? You're functioning quite a bit, right? So, what would you say is what would you say are the biggest differences now than before you joined the program, mentally and emotionally, or even well before the program, like when you initially got sick and the old Alex? What are some big differences between that Alex before and Alex now?
So I started this call explaining about all these factors with the stomach disease and financial stress and everything.
Hmm.
But I think was a trigger, like made this big of an impact, was also big part because of my personality, and because apparently I couldn't handle stressful situations. I would get mad very fast, but I would get like very angry at stuff, but it was all internally. And this was with every situation, with like work, relationships, I don't know what, basically everything. I think that's the biggest difference, and why this is so important, because when you get very emotional about stuff, I think that has the biggest impact on your nervous system, way more than when you're doing cognitive stuff, and especially more than doing physical stuff.
one Hundred
Yeah,
percent. Yeah. So
and that's the biggest difference.
yeah, so you before it's like you're very emotional, or the emotions would be bottling up and you're easily triggered, and your nervous system was on edge. So now that you know the impact of that, you're able to just control it a lot more, and it's
Yeah,
you're not as on edge, right?
I think the best example how I know that I changed was my mom told me like a few months ago that she wasn't afraid to talk to me anymore. Like the past 30 years, she was always on edge because I would get angry about a lot of things. And of course, it has its history and how I grew up and how I had to like control my emotions all the time and stuff like that. But that was insane when I think about it. I would just get mad on everything what she would say, and now barely get mad. Even it doesn't matter what she says, and I think that's very important to be able to just let it go and not to oversensitize your whole nervous system all the time by these emotions.
Hmm. So you're much more in control of your emotions, and physically, just or overall, maybe just share what you're up to these days. Because it wasn't too long ago. It was
Hmm.
about just over a year ago. You were quite debilitated.
Yeah.
Seeing your friends maybe once every 6 to 7 weeks, going out with friends, and you're mainly at home. So, what is life like now? What are you up to these days?
Oh, that's like regarding social life, it's basically normal level right now. It doesn't seem I have any limitations anymore on the social part. When I look back, I said I was just walking. Like I would at least go outside once a day and just have a walk. Sometimes it would just be 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and sometimes I would have a longer walk, maybe 45, something up to an hour. But this was also around the time I started the program. Now I'm doing sports and I picked up my calisthenics a bit. I'm playing soccer. Just started a course of salsa dancing,
Nice.
and if yeah, when it's even more than what I could imagine. I still feel that sometimes I still have to pull back, but I don't mind pulling back. So just to skip a training or whatever, I seem to be very like lighthearted to just let a training go, and that was the difference with also before I got sick. No matter what, I had to push through, and that was with work or with going to do some sports. And I think I also continued doing that before I was sick, and the pushing through also contributed from me getting sick. So I'm also more in control of that. But I'm going to like concerts, festivals, like the noise and the people doesn't overstimulate my brain that much, or not, it doesn't do it anymore. And it used to be like if there were like three people in my room, I would get dizzy and I wouldn't be able to talk anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're
So it's a
doing
huge difference.
way more
Yeah.
stuff now. Much, much better. Like you're out there living at this point, and there's just maybe a couple symptoms left, but your activity level is like 50 times higher than it was uh, even just a year ago, which is awesome. And you're more in control of your emotions and everything. So, for people watching this right now, what would you say to somebody who's in the trenches and they're in a dark place, kind of where you were a couple years ago, and they're watching this right now, they're hearing your story, and they're thinking, "Wow, Alex has something special. Like maybe he's an alien. How did he recover? How is this possible?" What are some things you can tell them, maybe to help inspire them?
Well, um, I think it's important to mention that progress can be very, very slow, especially in the beginning. Like it can be very slow. You might also not see the differences, and I think the most important way to see progress is to compare yourself like month to month on how you feel, and especially I want to emphasize on how you feel, because if you would check like your activity levels, which I did at some point, like I still had like really bad days, um, like months after I started the program, and my bad days would be still way worse than than my good days a year before that. So it just comes down to having a lot of belief and having a lot of patience. And if somebody would tell me that, I would hate them, but that is what it comes down to. And especially do some. I did a lot of experimenting. For example, like my go-to brain retraining is to whatever I do is to have long out breaths, just to keep calm and have long out breaths. Even if I feel like really bad, I would do that. But also like this other stuff, like when I would walk, I would visualize that I have energy. I would tense up my back, like so I felt like a bit more stronger when I would walk. I would just experiment with a lot of stuff and have patience. And slowly on, when you do that, I believe, yeah, you will definitely improve. If you have a symptom or whatever, or for instance, if there's one specific thing, if you do that 100 times, something will change. And I think if you do that 1,000 times, you'll have a complete shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. It's powerful. So just keep on going, be patient, and repetition is key. Keep on doing it, even when you don't see change right away. That's why it doesn't work for a lot of people, just because they
Yeah.
give up too soon, or they're expecting these miracles, overnight or in 1 week. But it,
Hmm.
it takes time to build great things. It takes time to get your life back. Rome wasn't built in a day, and that's so true.
Yeah, I'm even thinking about it, like how I did a lot of things, but I think it's important also to note that there will be days that nothing will work, and you'll have bad days. You have very heightened anxiety, or really think that nothing is gonna change. But that's really just part of the process. You'll be in despair, but it's just important to just have this protocol for you, for yourself, that however you feel, whatever you do, you just follow the protocol of brain retraining and calming your mind. I think that's very important to mention that my I had so many roadblocks in my recovery and hating life at some point and whatever. But even though that happened quite sometimes, I always managed to stay calm more often than I would like panic.
Mm-hmm. There we go. And that's key. It's, no matter what, responding well to the symptoms, essentially, in a
Yeah.
way. That's, pretty much what you're saying. So, yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people watching this, or, a few steps behind you in recovery?
That's a good question.
Oh, I know.
Um,
Here's something people may wonder.
hmm.
What would you say the biggest mistake you made was when recovering? And I'm sure there's many, but what's something that stands out that if you didn't do this, it would have sped up recovery a lot faster? For me, I would say it's Googling all my symptoms, because I
Yeah,
spent a lot of time there. It put me in a dark downward spiral. But what would it be for you?
I think when I look back on this past year, something changed in February, and I remember I was talking about my mom, and my mom apparently had some CFS thing also going on when she was my age, and I figured out that she had some weird type of mindset where she didn't care anymore about dying. And what I mean with that is that she just started to suddenly live life uh, like it could be or less, but not be emotionally detached from what might happen. I know that's hard, but on I remember on that day, and I remember it was the 1st of February. That day, I suddenly just changed my mindset and didn't even think of consequences anymore. I would just do whatever I wanted, and just and not even be afraid if suddenly I would get weird symptoms. And I felt that progression went way faster from that moment on, and it started to really go exponentially.
Mm, I see.
But So all in all, you heard a lot of people say mindset is key, but it is really key. That will determine 50%.
And I'd say even more. It is a brain issue, a brain glitch, essentially, in the nervous system and the way your brain's communicating with your body. And if you get that part right, it makes the whole journey go by way faster. And yeah, it's a game changer when you can have these mind shifts, these massive mind shifts, right? So yeah, anyways, I appreciate you coming on here, sharing some of your story. There's a lot of people out there who are on the journey you've been on themselves right now. They're in that journey, in the thick of it, and I'm sure this is going to inspire a lot of them. And just appreciate you giving us your time and showing us what's possible, because now you're so close to pretty much getting your life back. You pretty much have your life back despite a few symptoms.
I am applying for IT jobs right now, so I'm about to go back in where I used to work in. So I'm already doing the sports, and I have the social life back, and the working life is maybe that last part which I had before I got sick.
Exactly.
But the biggest change, I think, is the personality part, which I mentioned before.
Yeah. So now you can you're just more living more sustainably, So the goal is to get you out of this mess, but also to make sure this never happens again. And now with your experience being on this journey and what you've learned and the knowledge you have, that's going to ensure that this doesn't happen again, even once you start doing all this stuff again. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So it's been awesome to have you here, Alex. And I hope you guys got a lot out of this video. This is just one of the many stories we have. So if you do feel like you need some extra help on your recovery journey, you can click the link down below. You can apply for the program. If you're the right fit, then we'd love to help you. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Comment down below your biggest takeaway, from anything Alex said. There are a lot of golden nuggets that he dropped. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Always remember, you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. See you in the next video.